What if the words you use every day were being secretly re-engineered to control how you think? That's the pretty wild idea at the heart of a text called the new Newspeak, and in this explainer, we're going to break down its vision of our very near future.
Right out of the gate, the source hits you with this. It's a real gut punch of an opener, right? It just forces you to rethink a word you thought you knew inside and out, and it sets this urgent tone for everything that follows.
And let's be clear. The source is saying this isn't some dystopian future, like a sci-fi novel. It argues this change is happening right now, on the very screens we're all glued to every single day.
All right, so let's dive into the first big idea from the text, how language itself is supposedly being turned into a weapon. What does it actually mean by this new Newspeak?
So here's how the text breaks down this new kind of new Newspeak. It's all about strategically twisting language. But the key thing here isn't just about, simple lying. The text claims the real goal is to reshape our vocabulary so that certain rebellious ideas become literally impossible to even think.
Okay, and this is where it gets really specific. Look at this. The text lays out how words we hear constantly are allegedly getting a complete makeover. It says, science gets twisted into a demand for obedience, election integrity becomes a smokescreen for suppression, and hate speech, well, that becomes a catch-all term to just shut down any idea that goes against the grain. The whole point the source is making is about this massive gap between what a word is supposed to mean and what it's really being used for.
Okay, so you're probably wondering, how did we even get here? Well, according to the source, this wasn't some sudden flip of a switch. The text maps out a very specific timeline of events it sees as the major turning points.
So check out this timeline. It really lays out the argument visually. It starts back in 2020, pointing to the phrase flatten the curve as the moment a precedent for control was set. Then it jumps to 2022, highlighting what it calls aggressive censorship by big tech. And it all leads up to the 2024 election, where the text argues language was fully unleashed as a weapon to shape narratives.
But here's the kicker. The source says all of that was just the warm-up act. Things were about to go into overdrive.
And that brings us to the next chapter, the AI takeover. The source argues that in 2025, a whole new set of forces jumped into the ring and completely changed the game.
The text claims there were three huge game changers that kicked things into high gear. First, you've got AI churning out trusted news that's been trained on squeaky clean data, creating this echo chamber of approved info. Second, it points to corporate ESG mandates, which it claims basically force ideological rules from the top down. And third, a whole new wave of foreign influence operations flooding our feeds with propaganda dressed up as fun.
So, to really drive home the scale of this information war, the source throws out some big numbers. First up, $44 billion. It presents Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter as this huge moment of pushback, an attempt to grab back a major public square for free speech.
Then there's this number, $900 million. The source points to Disney's reported losses and links them directly to what it calls the company's diversity and inclusion mandates. The argument here is that this is the public pushing back against these corporate-pushed narratives.
And the last one is a biggie, $1.7 trillion. Now, the source makes a really provocative connection here. It links the student debt crisis to what it calls ideological programming on college campuses, basically arguing that the education system itself has been pulled into this whole system of language control. Okay, so you see all these different things happening. AI, big tech, corporate mandates. Are they all just random? Well, the source argues with a big, loud no, and says there's a hidden playbook tying it all together. The whole point the text is making here is that none of this is an accident. The source alleges that what looks like a bunch of separate trends is actually a deliberate, coordinated effort. It's like seeing a bunch of gears turning in a much, much larger machine.
Right, so if it's not random, that means someone's pulling the strings.
The text claims there's a very specific playbook being followed by powerful, well-connected groups. And here, the source actually names names. It points directly at the World Economic Forum and this term they use, stakeholder capitalism. Now, officially, it's about corporations serving everyone, not just shareholders. But the source claims that's just code for a system of top-down control by a global elite. But it doesn't stop there. This is where the source makes what is maybe its most shocking claim, bringing in a piece of technology that it says is already secretly being used. Okay, so get ready for this. The source describes this terrifying three-step process it calls preemptive control. Step 1, it alleges that tech linked to the NSA can actually predict harmful speech before you even finish typing it.
Step 2, our personal gadgets are monitoring us in real time. And Step 3, all that data is then used to shut down dissent before it even gets out into the world.
Now, that sounds like something straight out of a movie, right? Well, to back this up, the text cites an alleged whistleblower from 2025. This person supposedly revealed that a staggering 80% of what we see as verified news is actually AI-generated propaganda, all designed to prop up the official story.
So after all that, where does this leave us? Well, the source wraps things up by presenting us with a really stark choice.
So this is the bottom line, according to the source. We're at a crossroads. Path number 1 is inaction, which it says leads to a world of total control, where language itself becomes a prison. Path number 2 is awareness, which is presented as the only shot we have at getting truth and freedom back. And the final message from the text is this really heavy historical warning. It argues that when you corrupt a language, it's never just about politics. It's a symptom of a civilization in decay. A lesson, it says, that history has taught us over and over again.
And so, the source leaves us with one last question to chew on. It flips the whole thing back on us, and it asks us to look at the words we hear every day and decide for ourselves, what do they really